Some hearts collide not with a whisper, but with thunder. And some love stories begin not with a first glance, but with a final stand. This is the story of a woman who refused to be small, and a man who couldn't let her go. Natasha Moreno had perfection down to an art form. At 28, she could anticipate her boss's needs before he voiced them, coordinate international meetings across 7 time zones without breaking a sweat, and maintain composure even when Julian Hartfield, CEO of Hartfield Innovations, tore through the office like a winter storm. 3 years she'd given to this company. 3 years of early mornings and late nights, of swallowing her pride and biting her tongue. But everyone has a breaking point, and Natasha was about to reach hers. The morning started like any other Tuesday. Natasha arrived at the Glass Tower headquarters at 6:30, brewing Julian's specific blend of Colombian dark roast, arranging his schedule with military precision, and preparing for the day's most crucial meeting with venture capitalists from Singapore. These investors represented $80 million in potential funding, money that could propel Hartfield Innovations from successful to unstoppable. Julian arrived at 7 sharp, as always. At 34, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble, he rarely smiled. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. Brilliant, ruthless, impossible to please. What most people didn't know was that Julian Hartfield had learned early that vulnerability meant weakness, and weakness meant betrayal. The conference room filled quickly. Natasha had triple-checked every detail. Presentations loaded, financial projections printed, refreshments arranged. She stood near the back, ready to assist with whatever might be needed. Julian commanded the room effortlessly, his deep voice steady and authoritative as he outlined the company's expansion plans. Then disaster struck. The projection screen flickered and died. Natasha's stomach dropped. She rushed to the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The backup file wouldn't open. Somehow, overnight, the presentation had corrupted. She glanced at Julian, whose jaw had tightened dangerously. One of the Singaporean investors cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reschedule when you're better prepared." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Natasha knew what this meant. Months of work, of late nights and sacrificed weekends, about to evaporate because of one technical failure. But before she could explain, could apologize, could fix it, Julian turned to face her. His eyes were cold as Arctic ice. 3 years, Miss Moreno. 3 years, and you still managed to disappoint me at every critical juncture. Natasha felt the words like physical blows. Around the table, 12 pairs of eyes watched her humiliation. "This is unacceptable," Julian continued, his voice carrying that particular tone that made grown executives nervous. "Perhaps I've been too lenient with your repeated mistakes. Clearly you're not capable of handling responsibilities at this level." Something inside, Natasha snapped. Not broke, but snapped into perfect, crystalline clarity. She looked at the man she'd dedicated 3 years to supporting. The man she'd privately admired despite his harshness, and suddenly saw him clearly, someone so wounded by his past that he hurt others to feel in control. Without a word, Natasha walked to the credenza where Julian's coffee sat steaming. She picked up the cup, feeling its warmth through the porcelain. The room had gone silent, sensing something about to happen. Natasha turned back to Julian, who watched her with narrowed eyes. "Miss Moreno, what do you think you're—" She threw the coffee. Not wildly, not hysterically, but with deliberate precision. The dark liquid splashed across his crisp white shirt, his designer tie, his $5,000 suit. The shock on his face was almost worth the career suicide. "I quit," Natasha said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. She unclipped her security badge and set it on the conference table with a definitive click. 3 years I've given you loyalty, dedication, and excellence. 3 years I've covered for your mistakes, smoothed over your rough edges with clients, and made you look good. And you thank me by using me as your scapegoat?" She turned to the investors, offering a small, professional smile. The presentation failed because Mr. Hartfield made last-minute changes at 2 this morning and accidentally corrupted the file. "I had a backup, but it seems someone—" She glanced meaningfully at Julian. Didn't follow proper version control protocols. My apologies that you had to witness this unprofessionalism. Then she turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with satisfying finality. Freedom felt like wings spreading across her shoulders. She'd find another job. She always did. She was talented, capable, and better off without a hand caught her wrist. Strong and urgent. Natasha gasped as Julian spun her around. He stood inches away, coffee dripping from his chin, his white shirt ruined, his usual composure shattered. But his eyes burned with something she'd never seen before. Not anger, but something raw and desperate and terrifying. "You're mine," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. 3 words that made no sense but somehow changed everything. Natasha single quotes, his heart hammered against her ribs. "What? You heard me?" His grip on her wrist didn't hurt, but it was firm, unyielding. "You're mine, Natasha. You don't get to just walk away." "Watch me," she whispered, pulling free with more strength than she knew she possessed. This time when she walked away, he didn't follow. But as the elevator doors closed, Natasha caught one last glimpse of Julian Hartfield standing in the hallway, looking lost in a way that made her chest ache. She pressed herself against the elevator wall, willing her hands to stop shaking. What had she done? More importantly, what had he meant by those words? And why, despite everything, did part of her want to go back and find out? Felt like freedom. Natasha slept in, caught up on reading. It's called friends she'd neglected during her years of servitude to Hartfield Innovations. She updated her resume with confidence. With her experience and skills, she'd have a new position within 2 weeks. By day 7, confidence had shifted to concern. Every interview she scheduled got mysteriously canceled. Every job offer suddenly vanished. Recruiters who'd been enthusiastic became apologetic and vague. The position has been filled. They're restructuring the department. Perhaps something better suited to your skills will come along. Natasha wasn't naive. She made calls, asked careful questions, and discovered the truth. Julian Hartfield's name appeared in her employment verification requests. And whatever he was saying made companies back away, like she carried a contagious disease. The realization hit her like cold water. He was systematically destroying her career prospects. But why? Out of spite, revenge, or something else entirely? On day 9, strange things began happening. Natasha walked to her neighborhood coffee shop and found Julian sitting at a corner table, reading the Financial Times as if he belonged there. Their eyes met. He didn't look away, just took a slow sip of his espresso, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. Coincidence, Natasha told herself, grabbing her latte and rushing out. The next morning, she went jogging in the park she'd run in for 5 years, and there was Julian, in running clothes that showed off an athleticism she'd never noticed in his business suits, stretching near her favorite trail. He nodded as she passed, casual as if they ran into each other every day. By the 3rd coincidence at her grocery store, Natasha had had enough. She cornered him in the organic produce section, fury radiating from every pore. "Are you following me?" she hissed, aware of other shoppers nearby. Julian examined a mango with intense concentration. "I live in this neighborhood too, Natasha. Am I not allowed to shop?" "You live in a penthouse downtown. This is 20 minutes from your building. I'm looking at real estate nearby." He set down the mango and finally met her gaze. Properties with good jogging trails and excellent coffee shops. Natasha's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want from me?" "Dinner. Tonight. 7 o'clock. "Absolutely not." "Then I suppose you'll continue to find the job market surprisingly difficult." He said it without malice. Just simple fact, which made it worse. "You're blacklisting me." The words came out flat. Defeated, I'm protecting my interests. Julian stepped closer. Close enough that she caught his scent. Sandalwood and something uniquely him. "You have inside knowledge of my company, my strategies, my weaknesses. I can't have you working for competitors. So you're willing to destroy my livelihood out of paranoia? I'm willing to make you an offer instead." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Come work for me again. 6 months. Your salary tripled." but not as my assistant. Natasha laughed bitterly. Then what? Your personal punching bag? My companion. The word hung between them, loaded with implications. I need someone to accompany me to social events, galas, business dinners. Someone intelligent who understands my world. Someone who can hold her own in any room. You want to pay me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Natasha couldn't believe what she was hearing. I want to pay you to be yourself in public settings. What we are or aren't in private is irrelevant. But his eyes said something different, something that made her pulse quicken. Natasha wanted to refuse. Wanted to throw his offer back in his face the way she'd thrown that coffee. But reality crashed down hard. Her father needed his medication that cost more each month than she'd saved. The rent was due in a week. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. 6 months, she said finally, with a contract. Everything clearly outlined, and after 6 months, you give me a glowing recommendation letter and never interfere in my career again. Agreed. 8. Julian extended his hand. We start this Saturday. There's a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. I'll send a car for you at 6. Natasha shook his hand, trying to ignore the electric current that seemed to run from his palm to hers. This doesn't mean I forgive you. I know. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw something vulnerable beneath. But maybe you'll understand me. Saturday arrived too quickly. Natasha chose a deep emerald dress that was elegant but not revealing, professional but beautiful. When Julian's driver picked her up, she felt like Cinderella heading to a ball she didn't want to attend. Julian met her in the museum's grand foyer, devastating in a tuxedo that fit him like it was sculpted onto his body. His eyes widened when he saw her, traveling from her face down to her heels and back up with an appreciation that made her skin warm.
Ow.
You look breathtaking, he said simply, offering his arm. You look presentable, she replied, but couldn't quite keep the smile from her voice. The gala was a whirlwind of wealth and influence. Julian introduced her to tech moguls, old money socialites, politicians, and entrepreneurs. His hand never left the small of her back, a constant warm presence that both steadied and unnerved her. To everyone watching, they must have looked like a couple deeply in love. Then Victoria Ashford appeared, woman in her 50s dripping in diamonds and disdain. Julian, darling. She air-kissed near his cheeks before turning calculating eyes on Natasha. And who is this lovely young thing? Natasha Moreno, Julian said smoothly. My partner. Partner? Victoria's smile sharpened. In business or pleasure? Or are you still hiring from the secretarial pool for entertainment? Natasha felt the insult like a slap, but before she could respond, Julian's entire demeanor changed. His voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze fire. Careful, Victoria. You're speaking about the woman I'm with, and I don't tolerate disrespect toward her. If you can't manage basic courtesy, perhaps you should leave before I... Remember certain details about your husband's offshore accounts that the IRS might find interesting? Victoria paled and retreated so fast, she nearly stumbled. Natasha stared at Julian, shocked. He defended her viciously, publicly, against a woman with tremendous social influence. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. His hand tightened on her waist, possessive and protective. No one speaks to you that way. Not while I'm breathing. Natasha looked into his eyes and saw something that terrified her, genuine emotion. This wasn't just a business arrangement for him. Maybe it never had been. And the worst part? She was starting to feel the same way. Working late had become their ritual. It's 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. Natasha would stay after everyone else had gone home. They'd order takeout, review contracts, strategize about upcoming deals, but increasingly, they just talked. They talked about their childhoods and dreams, about failures and fears, about the versions of themselves they showed the world versus who they really were inside. Tonight, with rain drumming against the floor, 2 ceiling windows, and the city glowing below, Julian seemed different. More open, more real. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and was nursing his 3rd cup of coffee. Natasha looked up from the quarterly report she'd been pretending to review. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Push everyone away, I mean. You're brilliant and successful, but you're also completely alone." Julian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. 5 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Christine. I thought she loved me for who I was, not what I had. He stared out at the rain-streaked glass. Turned out she was passing company secrets to my biggest competitor. Every intimate conversation, every vulnerable moment was just her gathering intelligence. When I confronted her, she laughed. She said loving me was just good business. Natasha's chest tightened. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I built walls after that," he continued, his voice low. "I decided it was easier to be cold than to risk that kind of betrayal again. And then you walked into my life 3 years ago with your impossible standards and your refusal to be intimidated. And you terrified me." He turned to face her, his eyes intense, pinning her in place. "Because I wanted to trust you. I wanted to let you in. Done that. Scared me more than any business deal ever could. So you pushed me away," Natasha said, a wave of understanding washing over her. "You tested me. Before I could hurt you." "Yes. And when you threw that coffee and walked away, I realized I'd lost the only person who'd ever seen past my defenses. The only person who called me on my nonsense. The only person who felt real." He moved closer, the space between them shrinking, until she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I've made a lot of brilliant business decisions in my life, Natasha. Letting you go was the stupidest thing I've ever done." Just then, Natasha's phone buzzed, shattering the fragile moment. She glanced at the screen, and her entire world tilted on its axis, which was her father's name, but it was her stepmother's voice on the line, panicked and tearful. "Natasha, you need to come to the hospital. Your father collapsed. They're saying something about his heart, and we need to decide about emergency surgery, but the insurance won't cover it without. ... double quotes. The phone slipped from Natasha's numb fingers. Before it could hit the floor, Julian caught it. Caught her too, his hand steadying her arm as he listened to the frantic voice on the other end. When he spoke, his tone was commanding, certain. "Which hospital? I'm sending my personal physician and authorizing whatever procedures are necessary. Cost is irrelevant. I'll handle everything." Natasha looked up at him, her vision blurred by tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to." He grabbed his jacket and his car keys, already moving toward the door. "Come on, I'm driving you there now." The next 6 hours were a blur of antiseptic smells and hushed voices. Julian stayed by her side through all of it, the endless waiting, the clipped updates from doctors, the agonizing uncertainty that gnawed at her soul. He made phone calls, his voice calm and authoritative, arranging for the best cardiac surgeon in the state to consult. He handled the mountain of insurance paperwork that Natasha couldn't even focus on. When her stepmother arrived with her younger brother, Julian quietly stepped back, giving them space while remaining close enough to be a silent, solid presence she could lean on. At 3 a.m, the surgeon finally emerged from the operating room. He looked tired but relieved. Her father was going to be okay. The surgery had been a success. Julian had literally saved his life by ensuring he got the immediate world-class care he needed. Natasha found Julian in the deserted waiting room staring at his phone. When he saw her, he stood, his expression questioning. She didn't say a word. She just walked straight into his arms, and he held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, the fabric of his shirt dampening with her tears. "I'll pay you back. Every penny. I don't know how long it'll take, but I will. Natasha." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands gently framing her face. "I didn't do it for repayment. I did it because I love you. I think I've loved you since the day you started working for me, maybe even before that, during your interview when you told me my management style needed improvement." A small smile touched his lips. "I've just been too broken and too scared to admit it." Natasha's breath caught in her throat. "You love me?" "Terrifyingly." "Completely," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I love your fire and your courage. I love how you never let me get away with anything. I love your loyalty and your strength, and the way you make me want to be a better man than I am." His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. "I love you enough that if you want to walk away after these 6 months are up, I'll let you go with that recommendation letter, and I will never contact you again. But I'm hoping you'll stay, not because of a contract, not because I'm paying you, but because you feel even a fraction of what I feel for you." She had spent 3 years working beside this infuriating, brilliant man, 3 months fighting him, the past few weeks slowly, painstakingly understanding him. And in this moment, with her defenses worn down by fear and relief and sheer exhaustion, she could finally admit the truth she'd been hiding even from herself. "I love you too," she said, and watched his expression transform from cautious hope to pure, unadulterated joy. "You're stubborn and difficult and sometimes insufferable, but you're also loyal and protective and capable of such tenderness when you let yourself be vulnerable. I love all of it. I love you." When he kissed her, it wasn't a spark. It was a homecoming. It felt like every argument, every slammed door, and every moment of unspoken tension had all been leading to this exact point: two broken people finding wholeness in each other. Weeks later, after her father had recovered and returned home, Natasha and Julian sat down to renegotiate their contract. Not as employer and employee, not as a client and a companion, but as partners. In every sense of the word. She became the chief operating officer of Hartfield Innovations, bringing her sharp skills and unwavering insights to the highest level of the company. More importantly, she became the person Julian trusted with his heart, and he became the person she chose to build a life with. On their 1-year anniversary, they stood in the same conference room where she'd thrown coffee at him, a moment that now felt like a lifetime ago. Julian gave her a gift. It was her old security badge, the one she'd slammed on the table that day, now beautifully framed. Beneath it was a small engraved plaque. It read, "To the woman brave enough to call me out, walk away, and come back. You're mine, and I'm yours, always." Natasha laughed, a sound full of joy and love. She kissed him deeply, then whispered against his lips, "Next time, I'm throwing something stronger than coffee." He grinned. "I'm counting on it." Because some love stories don't begin with fairy tale perfection. Some begin with fire and fury, with walls crumbling and pride surrendering to a force much greater than itself. Some begin when two people stop running from their fears and finally start running toward each other. And those stories, the ones forged in conflict and sealed in choice, those are the ones that last forever. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.